Hi guys, in today's tutorial we will see how to use forms in React.js. So I have already created that code. Let me show you what is the code basically. We have just take here a form. This is the form basically. All that code is of form, and I have imported that code from Bootstrap, and I have already created a complete tutorial on React Bootstrap, and I already told you that how can we import code. So I have imported that code from form of React Bootstrap, and this button I can get from Bootstrap or Material UI icons. So I took it from Material UI icons, and make sure you have imported both of them, React Bootstrap and Material UI. Let me show you that how can we check if Material UI and Bootstrap are installed or not. And here you can see that this is Material UI, and here we have React Bootstrap installed. Both of them are installed successfully. So here we have to show that what is the output basically, and you can see that this is the output. This is simple form, and here you can see that whenever we click on button, it is showing here a ripple. So this button is basically from Material UI, and that input form is basically from React Bootstrap. So without wasting any time, let's get started. And here this is the basically container property that I have used for the grading system. So here I have row, and inside this row I have hello. This is simple h3 tag, and I have just written hello to display here, to display it on the top of the form. And here I have second row, and inside second row I have two columns at left and two columns at right, and this is basically the 8 columns code which is at center. So here we have to take basically the data of input type, and all of you will be very familiar now that form is basically an important thing of any project, and these are extensively used in any development, no matter it can be a website or application. Of course, this is important thing to handle forms. So controllers, basically we have two types of forms. The first one is controlled form, and the second one is uncontrolled form. And in React.js, all of the forms are basically controlled. Control forms are those which are controlled by another development tool. Like this form is basically going to control by our React.js, and the forms which were in HTML and CSS were basically as uncontrolled forms. So this is all about control forms and uncontrolled form. And now let's get started to our code. Here we have simply input type, and here we have just name, and let me make here also placeholder as enter your name. I'm just writing full name, controllers, and let me show you the output. This is the output here. So I don't gonna take here form tag and closing form tag, and I will tell you the reason in my next tutorial that why I did not use here forms tag. So here basically I have to do work on that input type. This is basically a text type in which we have to type any text, and you can see that here it is typeable. We can write anything. So now what we have to do, basically I want whenever we write any code here, it will display us with hello. So how can we do that? The very first thing that we have to do is we have to write this h1, and here we have to give space, and with space we have to use curly braces, and inside these curly braces I am just writing name. This is just a variable, and here I have to type value, and what value I have to give here? Name. And there is another function that we have to call here, which is basically predefined onChange. OnChange means if there is any changing happens in this text type field, the onChange function would be called automatically. So let me make the name of that function. I am just writing func, and here I am going to display and make code about function is equal to, I am just going to create that as fat arrow function. So here what is basically happening, whenever any change occurs in the text type, there will be onChange because there is changing something in text type, and whenever there is any changing occurs in that type, the function will be called, which is known as func. So this function would be called automatically. So here the very first thing that we have to do is we have to take useState, and I have explained useState in a deep way. I am just going to use it. Set name and is equal to useState. It is empty for the time being. So now the name variable is basically empty. I am just going to make here colons as well, so that the name variable may get the initial value as empty. And what is basically happening here, whenever this function is called, basically we should have to update the value of that name with the help of that set name. So how can we do that? Let me show you what is the output till now. Control S, and here if I write anything, nothing happens. Basically I am not able to write something here just because of we are not going to update any value. That's why that empty that value which is showing to that name, so inside that name we have initial value and no value is updated. So I have to update that value whenever that change happens in this text type. So how can we do that? Here I am going to pass any value. I can pass event or or any other, is up to us. I am just going to pass that event, and let me show you the event here. I am just writing console.log, and here I am just going to write function called to check if our function is called on changes or not. Press Ctrl S and move to our output and go to inspect, and here we have to move in our console. So whenever I write anything, you can see that the function called is basically written here, and whenever I type any value, the function call is going to make increment of 1 on my every onChange. So I don't need to basically write that console. So I have to just change the values of that useState. So here I have set value. So somehow I have to get the value of our this text type, and we have to display here as well as in our output, which is showing here as name. So let me show you first. Whenever I write anything, like I'm just going to write my name, Control S, and here you can see that it is showing my name here, and here as default. Why is it showing here as default and I am unable to remove that name? So what is the reason behind? Let me tell you. This name initial value is now as my name with the help of useState. So I have written here value as name, and the name has passed just engineer somewhere, so that's why it is showing here only that value, and this is basically typeable, but we cannot write here because all the thing is going to be controlled by our React.js. So whenever any change happens, this function is called successfully, and this value we have to get from onChange. So how can we get that value from onChange? I gonna just let me show you that how is it looking and how can I get the value. Event dot target. Just let me show here event. Press Ctrl S and let me show you the output. And now whenever I write anything, that event function is basically called at once. So let me move into deep. So what things basically we have in our event? We have basically bubbles, cancelable, and everything. These are just, you can say, functions. Is progression. Here is basically a lot of functions that are showing here, and all that functions are pointing to that event. So one thing that I didn't tell you, that what is basically event. Let me see here, and here you can see that that target is basically empty. We have to work with this target. So what is basically that target? It has a lot of functions as well, this target. And let me now show you that what is basically event here representing. Whenever we call that function, which is known as func, it is called on any change on that text type, and whenever this function is called, it would take by default a parameter, and this parameter is basically pointing out to that text type. So that's why we first of all we have to point out to that text type, and here we have to write target. Here we have to write dot target. And what about target? Basically this target is pointing to that input type, which is basically going to return here. So here we have to type target dot value. We are basically going to get the value of that target, and event is just an object of that text type. And let me make here dot value. Press Ctrl S and let me move again in our console, and here whenever I write anything, you can see that here it is showing everything. So let me remove that code so that it may not disturb you. So the initial value I am just going to make empty. Control S, and here whenever I write anything, it is basically showing in our console, and it is showing a single object as well. It is empty. Here we have to write. Here basically we have to set that name. We have to update that name value. So here I am going to write set name and curly, and this is, we have to use set name, and here inside set name we have to use braces, parentheses. Here we have to use set name. We have basically that function, and inside that function we have to use set name, and give here parentheses. Here you have to pass the value event dot target dot value. Press Ctrl S, and let me move in our code again. You can see that whenever I am going to write anything, it is basically going to show everything on the top dynamically. Whenever I remove anything, it is going to remove. So I have already told you that whenever any change happens on this text type, the onChange function is basically called. So inside that function we have passed a function which is known as func. So this func is basically calling that func that we have created, and it is going to take a parameter by default, which is just an object of our text type, and dot target dot value, we are basically now setting up the name value to that exact value which is dynamically taken here. And you can see that it is showing output. So one thing more, that we basically don't need to write dynamically store values in our database. We just want, whenever the user fill all the form and submit on that button, there should be first validation, and after validation the form should be submitted in database. So we don't need to write here anything, and it would store dynamically in our database as we are writing here, and everything is going to display here. So how can we do that? Whenever we click on that button, only in that case we are able to show here values. So how can we do that? The very first thing that you have to understand, here we have used useState, and this is the name that we are going to display with hello, and this initial value is 0. Initial value is empty, and whenever onChange function is called, this onChange function is basically setting that set name value with the dynamically getting value, which is getting by event.target.value, and no matter is this event or any other word, we can write anything, just like a parameter. It can be any parameter housed to you. So now I want, whenever the user click on that button, there would be only some meter data. Basically we are not going to use any database, that's why it is not going to submit any data. So we have just to display here with hello. So how can we do that? You can think it by yourself. Just pause the video and think by yourself, how can we do that? So the very first thing that we have to do is, whenever the user click on that button, there should be some function that is called, and with the help of that function we are able to display the data here. On click, and here I am just going to pass function submit, press Ctrl S, and here I am going to declare and initialize my submit function. Submit is equal to, here I have to give parentheses and equal sign, and this is fat arrow function. And now what I have to do, this function is created successfully. So let me check if this function is working or not whenever we click on that button. Console.log. I'm just writing to display submitted. Control S, and here it is an error. Submit is not defined. So let me check. At this point we have basically a mistake that we have taken a capital letter. No, it is small letter, and same as we have function created. Now I am going to inspect, and inside inspect I am going to console, and here you can see that whenever I click on that button, it will display here. Now you can see that it is also showing a ripple whenever this button is clicked, and the function is also displaying here the message that we have told it to display. So we can come to know that our button, and whenever we click on that button, our function is successfully called. Now we have to display the value only when the function is basically called, which is on click. Whenever we click on that button, the function, the data would be stored here only in the same case whenever the user must have to press that button, no matter if he enters the values here in text or not. So onChange function is called, and this function must be called, no matter that whenever onChange happens, the function would be called, and this function would make changes, and it would need here to display the values as well. So how can we do that? And the very first thing that I have to do, that I don't need here name. I am just taking any other parameter. First of all, I have to create another useState, and I'll tell you why I have used another useState. I am just writing here new name and set new name is equal to useState, and this value is initial value is basically empty. Now I have to use new name at this place. New name, just press Ctrl S, and you will see that till now nothing would be happened. So how can I basically update the value of new name with that name whenever we click on the button, because that value is dynamically going to change. And now we have taken another useState just to change the values when the button is clicked. So when button is clicked, we have to set new name value with that name. So here we have created that function, and I am going to use here set new name, which I am going to update the value of new name, and here I have to type name, and here I am going to make it as comment. Press Ctrl S and move in our browser output, Here I am just writing my name, and now you can see that whenever I click on the button, here it is showing my name. And I have already told you that how basically is it working. I have told the complete structure step by step. So now I hope you came to know clearly. I have told you that why I have used basically two use states and that function, and as well as that function submit. So I hope you understood it. And in our next tutorial, we will see that if we have multiple input types, then how can we handle to these multiple text types. So we will see this thing in our next tutorial. For the time being, it is just showing that how can we handle basically our forms. So I can write anything, and whenever I click on button, you can see that the value is updated with our same text type that we have.